I think the sweet spot is often around about 3 to 5 years, because 3 to 5 years gives you enough time to get really stuck in and show what you can do. But after 3 to 5 years, most people are actually ready to move on to something else anyway. Hello there, I'm Sarah McLusky, and this is Research Adjacent. Each episode, I talk to amazing research adjacent professionals about what they do and why it makes a difference. Keep listening to find out why we think the research adjacent space is where the real magic happens. Hello there, it's Sarah, and this episode is just going to be me this week. And it's because I wanted to pick up on something that has been coming up in quite a few of the interviews that I've been doing. And that is that a lot of people have been talking about some of the challenges of short contracts and job precarity in the research adjacent sector. Now, I don't want to put anybody off these rewarding jobs because they are picking up the idea that research adjacent jobs are unstable or hard to get. And in fact, from my experience in recruitment, there's actually a lot less competition for research adjacent jobs than there is for academic jobs. But that doesn't mean that it's not hard sometimes, and it doesn't mean there's no bad practice. And my heart goes out to anybody who is at the moment struggling with a contract coming to an end or facing redundancy or anything like that. It's really, really tough. But I do just want to reframe some of the conversations around contracts and help you to understand why things might not be as bad as you think. So in this episode, I'm going to be covering what characterises what we might think of as good work. I'm going to do a bit of jargon busting and the difference between fixed term, open-ended and fractional contracts. I'm going to tell you why, in my opinion, open-ended isn't always better, but also some of the toxic practice that you might want to watch out for. That said, thinking as well about when short contracts might actually be the right thing for you depending on your circumstances and your career stage. And if you do find yourself in a fixed term contract, how to make the most of that opportunity. So, first of all, what do we think of when we think of good work? Last year, I did a report for the Institute of Medical Humanities at Durham University looking at some issues around research culture. And I came across a really interesting report called Health Equity in England, the Marmot Review 10 years on. And if you're interested, I'll put a link in the show notes for that. And one of the things it looks at is not just about academia or the university sector or research or anything like that. It's about the relationship between work, poverty and health. And it does have some interesting thoughts on precarity, which is why I ended up going there. But one of the things I think is interesting is they have quite a clear definition of what they consider to be good work. And they say good quality work is characterised by features including job security, adequate pay for a healthy life, strong working relationships and social support, promotion of health, safety and psychological well-being, support for employee voice and representation, inclusion of varied and interesting work, a fair workplace, promotion of learning development and skills use, a good effort-reward balance, support for autonomy, control and task discretion, and a good work-life balance. Now you'll see there that job security is one element of that, but it is not the only thing that characterises good work, and certainly at certain times in your life job security will be more important than other times, but it is not the be-all and end-all. So, some of the jargon around different types of contracts, particularly for anybody who's quite new to working. So fixed term, as the name suggests, means that it's a job that is for a certain period of time. And that might be a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 10 years. But it is a job that has got a specific end date related to it. Whereas an open-ended or permanent job means one that continues indefinitely. And that doesn't necessarily mean it continues indefinitely, we'll come to that in a minute, but on paper there is no fixed end date. Fractional, on the other hand, is a job which is less than full-time. So full-time is often referred to as 1 FTE, you might see that written down, and FTE stands for full-time equivalent. So 1 FTE means 5 days a week. Sometimes you might see 0.8 FTE, and that means 4 days a week. 0.6 FTE is 3 days a week, and so on. It doesn't necessarily mean you actually work 4 days a week. It might be that the hours are spread across 5 days, but there's all sorts of different patterns. Now, all of these have pros and cons. And a lot of people talk about open-ended contracts as being the only ones worth having. That's not always the case. It's also a fact that open-ended contracts are becoming more and more rare in all workplaces, and fixed-term contracts are definitely not the enemy. There are good fixed-term contracts and there are bad fixed-term contracts, and the important thing is to learn to spot the difference. And there's also times in your life when a fixed-term contract will be the best choice, and short contracts are completely normal at the start of your career as you move around figuring out what it is you want to do, where it is you want to live, what you want your life to look like. So that is just a rite of passage for everybody. And also, it's really important to know that fixed-term contracts are inevitable in places like universities and charities and similar organisations where the job is attached to funding which has been awarded for a certain project or for a particular period of time. And there's no getting around that. Jobs can also be fixed-term contracts because the organisation is trying out something new. So, for example, they want to see if the job works well or if you have the success that they wanted before they consider making it longer term. Or it might also be that they're a maternity cover or a secondment cover. So I would say it's always worth knowing why a contract is fixed term so that you can understand what that means for you and what success will look like in that role, because it does vary. So on to this endless debate of fixed term versus open-ended contracts. The good thing about a fixed term contract, actually, it was my dad who said this to me, and it completely blew my mind, is if it's a fixed term contract, you know for definite that there is money there to cover the job for that period of time. In somewhere like a university or a charity, they've got funding, they've definitely got the funding for that period of time. That might be a surprising thing to you, and open-end contracts might sound secure, but the hard truth is actually you could be made redundant or restructured at any time. Now, universities don't tend to be as brutal about this as some other organisations, but certainly I once worked somewhere where I did have an open-ended contract, as did another colleague, and we came in one Monday morning for them to be told that their job had been made redundant and they had to leave the building immediately. Now, in the end, that had been done really badly, and the union helped them and they were able to get some compensation for that. But they did not get their job back. The job was made redundant. And so it's an odd thing to get your head around sometimes, but actually fixed term is more secure for that period of time than an open-ended contract is. Another thing about open-ended contracts is that it might sound appealing, and certainly they help you to get mortgages and all sorts of things like that. I'm not disregarding that aspect of it, but I think very few people actually want to stay in one job indefinitely, and if it's a job that's poorly managed or there is no progression or flexibility in the role, then it can become stagnant pretty quickly and you might actually find that you want to leave pretty soon. And actually there's 3 times in my 20-year career that I have had open-ended contracts, and in 2 of those jobs I only stayed for 18 months, which are among the shortest jobs that I have had in my career. So an open-ended contract doesn't necessarily, it gives you security, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll want to stay. Another thing about fixed-term contracts is that it's often more clear what success looks like. So it's clear that, you complete the project, you hit the targets, maybe the target, you get additional funding to continue the role. It's much clearer what it, you can tick the box and say, I have achieved that. And that's usually the case with a fixed term contract. That said, though, there are really toxic contracts out there. And these are some of the things that I would say are red flags. They're not always going to mean that it's not right for you, but they are things to be very aware of. One of them is jobs which are too short. And I think fixed term contracts that are less than about 12 months just don't really give you a chance to get in and get going and show what you can do. Maybe it's just keeping the seat warm for somebody else, or maybe you're covering a job that somebody's left at the end of a grant or something like that. But they're rarely, you can rarely really get your teeth stuck in if it's less than 12 months. Another thing to watch out for is jobs that are too fractional. Now, if there's a job that's only 1 or 2 days a week, so that's a 0.2 or a 0.4, if you have a couple of meetings and catch up on your email, then your time has gone without you actually achieving very much in terms of the job. And in many cases, a job that is 1 or 2 days a week won't be enough to live on. You're not going to earn enough money to pay the bills. And whenever I've been in a situation where we've been looking at employing somebody on a fractional contract, I've always tried to have a really serious conversation about who do we think is going to apply for that job. Because if you have a job that's only 1 or 2 days a week, it's only going to be appealing to a certain sector of the workforce. And if that's what you want, that's fine. Maybe it's a student, you want to get in a student who can just do a day a week alongside their studies. Maybe that's fine. Or maybe you might be aware that you're looking for somebody who has young children and they're looking for a job that they can work around their childcare responsibilities. But fractional jobs do appeal only to certain types of candidates, and that's something to be aware of. Another thing to watch out for is jobs that seem like it's a bit too much work for the grade or the time or the budget that they've got. It's really common for a job to be advertised as 0.8 when actually it's a full-time job, or they expect you to be available full-time, to be answering emails 5 days a week or something like that. And it might be being done to save time. Another thing that happens is sometimes in places like universities where they've got these quite specific grade structures for jobs, it might be that it's actually a more challenging job, but they can't afford to pay at that rate. So they put it at a lower grade, which might give you mixed messages about what the job will actually entail. And the other thing that's really, really toxic, and it's an ongoing debate in universities at the moment, so I won't go into it too much, which is where a job is either hourly paid or short term, but there is an ongoing business need for that role. So that might mean administration around a course, and they're only looking for somebody that's in term time or something, even though in the holidays there's going to be processing of all the exam papers and bringing in the next year's students and all that sort of stuff. So if there's an ongoing business need but they're not paying properly, I would approach all of those scenarios with caution. However, sometimes, depending on your circumstances, a short contract like a maternity cover can be the making of your career. And so they can be a good opportunity if they look like they might work for you in terms of the number of hours and the salary. One thing that it's worth knowing about these kinds of jobs is they usually have fewer applicants, or the applicants are not as well qualified. So that can be especially good if you are in a situation where you are trying to get your foot in the door at a particular organisation. It gives you a chance to get in there and make a good impression, because if you can get in there and make a good job of a 9-month maternity cover, then it puts you in a really good position for future jobs. It's also great if you're just starting out and you need to get some experience, because often, as I say, there will be fewer applicants or the applicants won't be as well qualified. So you might actually be able to get in and get experience of doing a slightly more senior job for a short period of time. And they can also be a good option if you are thinking about changing roles or exploring different career options. And to give you a little story about a friend who made this scenario work for her, is she was looking to move from teaching into a more university professional services role. She got into the organisation on a maternity cover job, and then was able to use that, build relationships, get to know the organisation, and then she got onto a slightly longer contract, and then onto a slightly longer contract still, and it has now been at that organisation for a number of years after initially going in on a part-time maternity cover. When it does come to fixed term contracts though, I think if you're looking around at what's out there, I think the sweet spot is often around about 3 to 5 years, because 3 to 5 years gives you enough time to get really stuck in and show what you can do. But after 3 to 5 years, most people are actually ready to move on to something else anyway. So making the most of a fixed term contract. If you are in a fixed term contract in an organisation where you want to stay, then some of the best advice I'd give you there is make sure, I think I said it earlier on as well, make sure you understand what success looks like for that role. What is it that they are looking for? and get out there and do it. So, it's fairly basic stuff. Make yourself indispensable. It's always good to be the only person who knows how to do a particular thing. Try to get yourself involved in planning the next project if you can, or kind of longer term planning in the organisation. And if you are working on projects which are grant funded, it might be possible to get yourself named on grant applications so that if they are successful, then you've got a guaranteed job. It's also a great opportunity to get to know people and jobs elsewhere in the organisation that you're working in, or with the partners that you're working with, and that will help you to get a better idea of what your next move might be. And another thing that's great about being in an organisation is that often there are internal only jobs that come up, so you can keep an eye out for them as well. I just want to leave you with one thought as well, which is, as the person who's been involved in doing the recruitment and managing the people, changing staff is an absolutely huge drain on resources. The recruitment takes time and effort. The new people who come in have to be trained. There might be a gap between when you appoint them and when they can start because of the notice period they have to give at their employer and that sort of thing. And people who leave the organisation take all their knowledge and all their contacts and everything with them. Furthermore, staff who are on short contracts are constantly preoccupied looking for their next job. Now, good employers know that. They know all of this. And so if you've done a good job, then a good employer will want to try and find a way to keep you if they can. So that's something to keep in mind as well, if it is all feeling really tricky. I'll leave you though with one final thought, and that is, if you have a burning desire to get out there and change the system, then maybe consider a job in research adjacent HR, because apparently there are massive shortages in HR at the moment, which might be one of the reasons why this is such a tricky area. For anyone who doesn't know, HR is human resources, which tends to be the department in universities that deals with recruitment and contracts. So those are my thoughts on the differences between fixed term, open-ended, fractional contracts, that sort of thing. I hope that might have given you a little bit of food for thought, and maybe moving away slightly from a sort of what's called a scarcity mindset around this, and thinking about how to use the jobs that are out there as an opportunity for you to build the career that you want, and hopefully a research adjacent career if you're listening to this. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Research Adjacent. You can find show notes and other episodes at researchadjacent.com. I would absolutely love to hear what you think of the show, so please get in touch. You can drop us a message via researchadjacent.com or find us on social media at resadjacent. And if you've enjoyed the show, please think about sharing it, subscribing, or leaving a review so that other people can find us too. Research Adjacent is presented and produced by Sarah McLusky, and you, yes you, get a big gold star for listening right to the end. See you next time.